De acuerdo. Bueno, buenas tardes a todos. Muchas gracias por haber respondido a esta convocatoria y que estéis aquí atendiéndonos esta tarde. Espero que sea un webinar que realmente os resulte interesante y os aporte conocimiento e inquietud en aprender esta técnica que realmente se está convirtiendo en una técnica espectacular. Hoy vamos a hablar de la BFA. Vamos a ver si lo pronuncio bien, que yo el inglés no lo domino, y aunque sea bajito. BattleField Acupuncture. ¿Qué significa? Acupuntura de campo de batalla. Es un sistema desarrollado por un doctor, que creo que lo pronunciaré también bien, tarde o temprano. Espera, que se me ha ido el nombre del doctor. Ahora, Naimsau. Doctor Richard Naimsau, que es coronel de la Fuerza Aérea de los Estados Unidos. Entonces, bueno, es un sistema donde se utiliza la acupuntura auricular y con unos resultados rápidos y espectaculares, sobre todo en el tratamiento del dolor, que es lo que lo ha hecho quizá más famoso. Pero también se tratan algunas otras cosas, como veremos el tratamiento del estrés postraumático en el segundo día del curso. ¿Vale? Estamos desde Shenlong realmente muy contentos de haber podido contar con John Howard, el profesor que nos va a dar el curso y que nos va a hablar hoy para presentarnos esta técnica, y agradecer a Sedatelec su apoyo para poder llevar esta iniciativa adelante. Creemos que es la primera vez que se presenta esta técnica en España y realmente estamos contentos y orgullosos de haber podido participar en ello y darle este impulso. Entonces, comentaros que propondremos un curso de formación completa de la BFA. Se hará en 2 días, 2 sábados. 2 sábados por la mañana de 4 horas. Será el sábado 18 de febrero y el 11 de marzo. ¿Cuál es la idea de hacerlo en 2 sábados? ¿Por qué no hacemos solo un sábado de 8 horas? La idea es que el primer sábado aprendéis casi todo, la técnica, tenéis 3 semanas para practicarla, ver sus resultados, y entonces el segundo sábado realmente es mucho más provechoso porque ya tenéis una cierta experiencia, y por eso se ha hecho de esta manera, para que realmente se aprenda bien y le saquéis el máximo partido a la técnica y podáis ayudar a vuestros pacientes. Es una técnica sencilla, fácil de aprender y de aplicar. No es necesario ser acupuntor, tener conocimientos de medicina china o ser previamente auriculoterapeuta para poder aprender esta técnica y aplicarla. ¿De acuerdo? Eso es importante, que no hay unos requisitos, bueno, requisitos lógicos de ser terapeuta, enfermero, fisioterapeuta, doctor, y dedicarte a esto, ¿no? Para poder aprenderlo y aplicarlo correctamente, pero que no necesitamos conocimientos previos. Entonces, gracias a la ayuda también de Sedatelec, el precio del curso está becado y saldrá a un precio realmente mucho más económico de lo que sería en principio. ¿De acuerdo? Pero os lo voy a decir ahora. Todo esto lo podéis encontrar en nuestra página web, en nuestro blog. Os mandaremos enlace y conexión para que lo podáis contratar directamente. El precio que dará del curso serán 247 euros. Funcionará un poco diferente a otros cursos, los que ya habéis trabajado con nosotros alguna otra vez. Esto lo podéis comprar directamente a través de nuestra tienda virtual, como compráis las agujas y los productos. Lo hemos hecho de esta manera porque, como va a ser más internacional, creemos que va a tener más difusión, hemos querido facilitar el acceso para no hacerlo complicado. A veces desde otro país tener que hacer una transferencia, complicado. Entonces lo hemos hecho de esta manera por ese motivo, ¿de acuerdo? Entonces, bueno, yo no me voy a enrollar mucho más. Os presentaré a John Howard, profesor, experto en acupuntura. Él ha trabajado durante 5 años con el doctor Richard Naimsau y ha estado trabajando tanto en formaciones en auriculoterapia y acupuntura para el dolor, técnicas e investigación. Sigue trabajando con él en algunas ocasiones, siguen en contacto y colaborando, y lleva enseñando la BattleField Acupuncture desde 2007 en América y Europa. Entonces, bueno, pues es un profesor, una persona muy cualificada para ofrecernos esta formación. Me gustaría contar ahora, presentaros a Stephanie como responsable de Seatelec. Seatelec es la empresa que creó Nogier, el padre de la auriculoterapia, ya creo que la mayoría sabéis quién es, y es la empresa pues, que ha ayudado con la materia prima, que son las agujas semipermanentes ASP, que son las que se usan en esta técnica, y la que está apoyando en darle difusión por todo el mundo. Entonces, Stephanie, te voy a dejar que nos hagas la presentación por parte de SEATELEC del curso del profesor y de por qué estáis apoyando esta iniciativa. Gracias, Stephanie.
Muchas gracias, Fede. Buenas noches, buenas tardes a todos. Me alegro estar de nuevo con vosotros para un live. Soy Stephanie Cochet, responsable de exportaciones para la empresa Sedatelec. Somos un fabricante francés de dispositivos médicos. Como ya se lo comentó Federico, claro, estamos muy conocidos en el mundo para las agujas semipermanentes, las ASP. Y bueno, nuestra misión es de contribuir al desarrollo de las medicinas complementarias, aportando soluciones de calidad tecnológicas, innovadoras y no farmacológicas. Y eso es el tema de esta noche, más que nada, porque la BattleField, que John os explicará, es un protocolo que ha sido reconocido en Estados Unidos por el Colegio de Médicos como una solución para luchar contra la crisis de los opioides en Estados Unidos. Entonces, yo creo que es más que nada al día en Europa mirar lo que están haciendo y cómo están luchando contra esta crisis, cómo evitar tomar pastillas y poder aportar una solución muy eficaz, muy rápida para los pacientes. Por esta razón, he tenido el placer de ver al doctor Nimsau en Estados Unidos hace algunos años ya, y él me presentó todo, cómo está funcionando todo en el campo militar, y yo me dije, tenemos que llevárselo a Europa. No puede ser que no sabíamos hacer esto. Y gracias a John, él se mueve por Europa, a veces virtualmente y a veces en persona. Lo estamos ahora difundiendo en Europa y compartimos esto con vosotros. Entonces me alegro mucho que estáis muchas personas esta noche y espero que iréis más allá participando en el curso, porque hay la BattleField primer nivel, que es un protocolo muy sencillo. Vais a decirme, ok, 5 puntos, muy fácil, pongo la ASP, hago caminar, muy bien. Pero después os digo ya un poquito, volvéis para el segundo sábado y ya veréis la BattleField avanzada. Y esto a mí me habla mucho, y después también hay unos protocolos derivados de la BattleField que John nos puede compartir si le estáis preguntando cosas. Entonces, es vuestro curso, es vuestra oportunidad para aprender de él, que tiene muchísima experiencia con la BattleField porque lo está utilizando cada día, y yo he tenido la suerte que él me trató varias veces con la BattleField y funcionó súper bien. Entonces, os dejo en sus manos, John. Te dejo presentar. ¿De qué se trata?
No estamos oyendo nada. No sé si no hemos abierto el micro o...
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Tiene que abrirlo John para que ya
So thank you for having me.
aquí te-
I'd like to introduce you to what battlefield acupuncture is, how was it invented, what it can be used for, why is it called battlefield acupuncture? And I'm going to show you some specific videos on how it's being used both clinically and also on the battlefield. And it has a great adaptation to both clinical and didactic settings. You can use it anywhere that you have patients. Some of the things you can treat with battlefield, how this protocol differs from other protocols, let's say like the NADA protocol. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about specifically about, I noticed over the course of the last 5 years about if you ask people their blood types, that will really help you determine how many needles you should use with battlefield, specifically with the ASP needles. And I connected some research. And then I'll show you at the end a video that talks about how the US military is getting the battlefield in the hospitals on the civilian sector. And you'll get to see them teach the doctors. So they, when they come out of medical school, when they get to their hospitals, this technique, specifically battlefield or even acupuncture, is now in the hospitals. And some clinical research. I provide you with some clinical links to where you can find some information about battlefield. So we're going to begin with a short video. And this is the video about battlefields on the battlefield. And in particular, they talk about two specific things. One is how much money they originally used to disseminate this protocol to the military. And second, about how they're going to get it into the military setting or into the civilian sector. But it's a real live video of battlefield acupuncture in actually action. So let's go.
We were teaching the enlisted medics because they go outside the wire, teaching them a lot of great questions. Right before the break, somebody said, "Hey doc, sometimes somebody gets shot, they're starting to bleed out. Well, I've lost that guy, but now somebody has to go put a tourniquet on him." After about a minute or two, they hurt so badly that somebody has to give that guy narcotics, and then you got to watch him, make sure he's breathing. And they put 2 on the senior enlisted guy there, of course. After about a minute, he's like, "I can barely move my hands. This is killing me." And so I grabbed 2 and I said, "Okay, you've learned this. Come up here right now and do it right in front of us." So we put the tourniquets on. True story. We then had, you put this one in, you put the next needle in. How do you feel? That's different. Wow. And he's starting to move his hands. I said, "Okay, next needle, about 10 seconds apart." Oh my God. He starts laughing and says, "Give me I think I could fire a gun." So unfortunately, that particular group that we taught, it was supposed to be 25, it was only 23 because 2 of them had been killed the previous week in a firefight. So it was really, it's truly somebody that's, you know, outside the wire and doing the mission, and they really need this kind of training that they can take out there. What we call acupuncture dates back 3,000–4,000 years to traditional Chinese medical practice. So with acupuncture, we know that we may dial in for using the ear as one of several sort of mini systems or microsystems, ear or scalp or hands, and we know that we can not only affect local, but we can affect their general sense of well-being. So acupuncture allows us to do more than just treat, put a Band-Aid on it, or give them a pill. It allows us to reach into the entire person.
Money was dedicated to take battlefield acupuncture and propagate it throughout the Department of Defense, healthcare providers, and the VA. And so we taught nearly 3,000 healthcare givers across the DoD and VA and close to 160 instructors on how to do battlefield acupuncture and how to teach battlefield acupuncture.
This is a strip of 8 of them. Clearly you can carry enough treatments for 5, 10, 15 people just in your pockets or in your BDUs or ACU pockets. Easy to pop out, and when you do, you just pop them out like that, and that's the applicator for 1 needle.
Tech Sergeant Jesse Sosa, part of the 89th Maintenance Group. I'm a flying crew chief on the C-32 and the C-40. Flying Vice President, First Lady, and a diplomat that needs to go overseas. When we carry high-profile duties as a Vice President, he brings a lot of Pelican cases which was one of the issues that strained my back. But the first time I got BattleField acupuncture, it was different. I wasn't expecting a lot out of it because I've tried everything, but I was open-minded. When the doc started to put needles in my ears, it was definitely a tingling sensation, but after a couple of days, I felt like I was a new man.
These are very simple to use, so if I have somebody that has migraine headaches or recurring headaches, if they're active duty and they have headaches and they have to pull guard duty, and I'm at a bare bones base and I've only got 3 people that share the guard duty, and suddenly Sam has got a bad headache today and this guy just got off and he's supposed to work tomorrow, oh, I'm strapped. If I give this guy narcotics, he can't use his gun, he can't use his weapon. But if the doc can put ear needles in him and he feels like, oh, I feel great, I can go to work, I'm not drowsy, then that's a huge force multiplier.
So that video was a good interpretation of what BattleField's being used for here in the US. In that video specifically, they mentioned 3 things that will be a key in our talk here. One is how much money that they originally spent on getting this into the military. That was $5 million, and they trained 3,000 people how to use BattleField, plus some instructors. Today, they're training about 10,000 military members per year in each branch of the service. So that's a lot. The second thing is that he talked about that one gentleman at the end about how his back was hurting. Well, his back hurt because he was carrying really heavy bags for the president and the vice president. So these individuals are people who were at the highest level in the military, and they're walking around with these needles. So the reason why it's being used now is because it came from the top down. The president eventually was the one, and the vice president, who said, we need to get this into the military. So BattleField was a really good way of getting people to reduce their pain, and also to see the higher ups actually embrace it. So let me just first talk about BattleField acupuncture. What is BattleField acupuncture? Well, it's a protocol, but we like to say it's an algorithm. And I'll explain to you what the difference is. A protocol is something that you use specific points. You use 5 or 6 points, and that's it. An algorithm is a feedback loop. And what Neemzal did in 2001 is he created this protocol, which we call Protocol BattleField. And it uses up to 5 points. You don't have to use all 5 points. And this is where it differs from NADA, is with the NADA protocol, they would use 5 points in each ear. With BattleField, it's different. You use as many needles as you need to get the patient to the desired pain level. So if their pain was, let's say, 7 or 8 out of 10, and you put 1 or 2 needles in, and their pain was a 1 or a 0, you would stop. You wouldn't need to go any further. That information you get back from the patients telling you about their pain level, that's what BattleField's about. It's about getting information feedback so you can better help your patients. And one of the other important concepts of BattleFields is that if possible, you have your patients walk between each needle for a short walk, and then you come back and you would put another needle in. For most protocols, we'll just have somebody lay there or sit there with needles in their ear for a specific given amount of time. So like I said, the BattleField algorithm, or some people call protocol, is nothing more than information feedback. You put a needle in, you have a patient walk. When he comes back, the information they give you, that's going to determine what you do next. If you need to go further or you need to stop. That's the great thing about BattleField. You don't need to use a lot of needles. You can get a fair amount of reduction in pain with just 1 or 2 needles. Personally, I can't even begin to tell you last time I'd use all 5 needles on a patient bilaterally. Maybe in a class we were learning how to put them in, or they wanted to feel what they felt like in specific points. But most of your patients will need just anywhere from 1 to 4 or 5 needles at most when doing BattleField. And like I said, that's where it differs from like the NADA protocol, where you'd sit there. And they both have their pros and cons. And when they work together, or you put them together, they have a great synergy. So it's not one or the other. You can use both. And that's what I really liked about BattleField. It didn't drown out other techniques or protocols, no matter what you were doing. So the invention of BattleField. Let's talk about that. So the BattleField protocol was invented by Dr. Niemzel. I think that's what. Pardon me. There we are. It was invented by this gentleman here. His name is Dr. Richard Niemzel, and he's an Air Force physician. And prior to him doing acupuncture, he was a physician, an oncologist for many years. Over a specific period of time, he was able to get the military to allow him to do acupuncture. And his goal was to help just people get better. He didn't care how they did it. He went to school in France. So even though he's an American, he went to school overseas. So he had a different way of looking at things. And I think that was really important on his outlook and his approach to this technique and auriculotherapy and acupuncture specifically. So how was BattleField invented? And that's the interesting thing, because it uses not only just knowledge that you learned in the book, but it was knowledge that was learned in real life. It was the information that Paul Noget disseminated so many years ago. It was based on the Noget work. But what Niemzel did is he combined some of his clinical knowledge that he used throughout his years of doing auriculotherapy. He always liked specific points. And he always wanted to incorporate those points. And his idea was, well, this works. How do I make this work faster? And how do I make this work longer? So he was always looking for a way to make things better, stronger, and last longer. And that came down to him having this drive to put together this BattleField. And there was 3 important steps that he actually used to come up with the protocol. The first one was his love of medicine. He always used 3 ear points, no matter what your condition was. He just felt like these 3 specific points in the ear always gave him the results he liked. They weren't great, but they were better than anything else. Later on, after he established that knowledge, he went to France, and that's where he came across the ASP needles. It was by chance, and he really thought this might be a good thing because, you know, he can give his patients these needles. They can go home with them. They didn't have to come back in and see him all the time, because some of these people would live far from where he was treating them at, maybe upwards of 100 kilometers. So the idea of these needles staying in place really spoke to him. The last piece of knowledge came when he came back from his training in France. He went to see a friend of his named Dr. Terry Olson. Olson here in the US wrote a book called The Manual of Auriculotherapy, and he's been friends with Terry Olson for many years. And Olson was doing some work with a man by the name of Z.H. Chu. Now, Dr. Chu is the gentleman who invented what's called the PET scan machine. So he went to the University of California, Irvine, to ask Olson, what does he know about these specific needles that he got from France, these ASP needles? And what Olson said to him was, he's like, Richard, I would love to talk to you, but we just got some information from fMRI research on specific points in the ear. I need to go look at this, interpret it. Can we talk some other time? So Richard said, sure. But he said, you know, Terry, I also have a degree where I can interpret research. Do you mind if I sit in on it? And Olson said, sure, come on in. And that research that they did, they were able to specifically find 2 points that helped not only with the pain of the patient, but also the emotional component that's affiliated with that pain in this research. So Niemzel said to Olson, well, what happens if you put a needle in those 2 points? What would happen? And Olson said, we don't know. We just got it back today. You can go try it. So what Niemzel did is he went back to his clinic the next day, and he had these ASP needles. He had these new points that Olson and Chu just got off their research. And when he put these needles in together, he was amazed about how fast and how well this protocol worked. And that's how he was able to facilitate this thing we call now battlefield acupuncture. So it was a multiple steps, clinical knowledge, scientific knowledge, and a little bit of intuition on his part. So that's the reason why Battlefield came about. Many years ago, prior to 2001, when I served on the battlefield, we only had a few types of medications. If you had an injury or something like that, you couldn't use morphine. And that was the case, you had to use ibuprofen. But now, with the invention of Battlefield, as you saw in the first video, there's now Battlefield, and of course there's other medications, but it really revolutionized the way we can treat people on the battlefield. And we took that knowledge and we brought it back into the clinic in the civilian sector, and it works really well. So you don't need to be on the battlefield to have this work for you, or in the military, it just works really well. So what I like to do now is I like to show you another video really quickly. This video talks about how Battlefield is combating those who are taking narcotics for pain management. And it shows you a step-by-step on how they're able to facilitate people coming off the battlefield and into the hospital. You're going to see a real live portion of a movie called Escape Fire. And I'm going to play it now.
If our civilian healthcare system is smoldering and we see it's going to catch on fire and burn pretty soon and is going to be unsustainable because of the costs, the military system is already on fire. It is a burning platform, and they see this. The costs are going through the roof, and the ability to help these service members and their families recover and repair and come back to a functional life is getting less and less.
I was in the worst place in Afghanistan. Korengal, the water pur, it's the most intense battleground that you can ever be in. I lost a lot of good men. Still bothers me to this day. I'm 2.5 months out of combat. My very best friend from war, he was on narcotics. He overdosed, respiratory shutdown. I lost him. And from that point on, I realized that I don't want to be on this. I don't want to go down the same path. I came to Walter Reed. I was on Valium, just for the anxiety. I was on antidepressants. I was on trazodone, Klonopin. I was so dependent on my pain medication. This medications I was on. You understand? That is how many medications I was on. When you're injured, they feed you. All this stuff. It's addictive. It is so addictive. I'd rather be shot again than go through withdrawals of coming off that medicine. No soldier should have to go through this.
As we've pushed medical innovation and capability to the leading edge of the battlefield, where we can save their life, we've got some guys that have some horrific injuries, and they're getting narcotics for a longer period of time. They certainly are at risk to develop dependency. And that's what we're trying to avoid. The Army Surgeon General directed that we establish the Pain Management Task Force to take a look at alternatives to narcotics.
There's very large randomized trials done at multiple centers that have demonstrated that acupuncture works. So we put together a study to see if we can actually insert this simple acupuncture technique during the aerovacs of wounded soldiers into Walter Reed and other medical centers in the United States. The question was, can we relieve their pain and reduce the amount of medications that they're on so by the time they get back, they're not snowed under on multiple medications?
Guten Abend, welcome to Germany, and welcome home. I know you're heading home and you're excited.
What at first seems like strange bedfellows, healing-oriented mind-body practices and sort of the hardcore military, actually is an opportunity that they jumped at because of the pragmatic need and nature that the wars have driven them to respond to.
It wears on your lower back, wearing, you know, a 40-pound vest, and it's got to the point where the pain's radiating from my back down to my hips and then down into my thighs. And that's it. That's my nightly routine.
First one's going in.
How's your pain, sir?
I feel like I'm warming up a little bit. Pretty impressive. Especially for it to react that quickly.
Right there. Okay. Go ahead and bed down.
That's pretty good.
Any pain?
Not when I'm doing that.
Normally you would?
Oh, yes. I haven't touched my toes in
Well, that
months.
means we're getting the needles in the right place.
Okay.
I haven't even got near my toes in months, unless I do this, you know.
Hi. How are you feeling?
I have pain, but it's more of an annoyance than it is pain. It's sore.
If you didn't have the acupuncture needles, how do you think you would be feeling now?
I'd be jumping narcotic.
Oh, you would?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, so you haven't taken it?
No.
Because of that? That's good.
15 years ago, we did a consensus conference at the National Institutes of Health, and we asked the question, do we have good evidence to show that acupuncture is safe and effective for any condition? They said, absolutely, it's been demonstrated that acupuncture is safe and effective, especially with post-operative and injury pain.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
15 years later, you can't walk into your average hospital today and get acupuncture after an operation. The problem is not that it doesn't work. The problem is that we haven't figured out how to get it into the system so that we can make it widely available to the population.
Okay, so that was a short video on how BattleField works in the military setting. At the end of that video, the gentleman speaking, his name is Dr. Jonas, he talked about how are you going to get this into the hospital setting or into the clinical setting. And later on, I'm going to tell you what they're doing now to do that. But before we get there, let's talk about what you can use BattleField for. As you know, it's being used on the battlefield, but it can be used for multiple types of pain conditions, both acute and chronic. It works really well in situations for like emergency medicine, ambulatory care, really quick areas. The other thing too is some patients will have, some practitioners will have patients come in and they might say, you know, I would love to get acupuncture today or some therapy, but I can't lay or I can't sit for any period of time. And with BattleField it's really great because all you need is just to expose the ear. And within moments, just a few moments, you can actually give them some relief. And that happens quite a lot in my clinic. My patients can't, facilitate around too easy. So by using a little bit of BattleField first, sometimes we can get them to that point where I can give them what they need. Some of the other conditions it's used mainly for is some acute ankle sprains and strains, neck, back, arm, leg pain. It's really good for headaches. as you've been hearing in some of these videos they've been talking about it. The other thing is you can use it before and after surgery, pre-op and post-op. It works really well to cut down on some of the medication the patients will have after the surgery. One of the clinical papers I have to present that you can read on your own too is about a specific hospital that used BattleField prior to doing surgery on their patients. And the results afterwards was so good is that they wanted to train all their physicians to do this. So, and then BattleField's really good too, because some of your patients may not tolerate medications, or they may not be able to take medications. And this is a good fit. BattleField is a really good way of getting them some quick and fast pain relief. So some of the conditions that BattleField would be needed more than once is you have patients who have chronic issues like chronic headaches, neuropathic pain, MS, idiopathic pain that's undiagnosed, or just long-standing. These are your patients that would need just more than 1 or 2 treatments of BattleField. They would need multiple treatments, plus whatever else you're doing, whatever other kind of therapies, you can incorporate that with the BattleField. It's a great protocol, but it's like anything else. It needs time, and it needs the body to kind of start to accept it and work with it. The other thing is, in the videos you saw people walking. That was really a key point with BattleField. When I first saw it myself, I was really taken aback, like, wow, they're making these people walk. I asked the inventor, Dr. Richard Niemzel, well, why do you have these patients walk? And he said it stimulates the vagus nerve. It helps them heal quicker. It helps the pain reduction much quicker. And I thought that was really interesting because, the vagus nerve does intersect into the ear. And he also took an approach where if your patients can't walk, or if they're immobilized, you can still use BattleField, but the only difference is the duration of time in between the insertion of needles, where if they can walk, it's a shorter period of time, where if they can't walk, it might wait a minute or 2. But it's a great technique. It can be used on anyone, anywhere, any person. So no matter what your patient's pain is, you put the needles in as they walk, you'll see it gets better and better when they continue to get the treatment of BattleField. It works really quickly. I guess it's one of those things you have to see it to actually comprehend it. So after we insert a needle with our patients, we have them take a short little walk. When they come back, before we put the next needle in, we stop and we say, okay, before I put this needle in, we started and your pain level was, let's say, a 7. I put this needle in, you went for a short walk. Now tell me what your pain level is now. So that's that feedback loop I was talking about, which is a difference between a protocol and an algorithm. We're using that information that the patient is now relaying to us to determine what we do next. So the walking, the needling, that's all done to help the patients kind of comprehend what's going on. Because if you've been in pain for a long period of time, sometimes your body's still kind of adjusting, like, is that really pain I feel? Or what is this? Or whatever. But by walking, it really helps facilitate the patient's ability to reduce their pain over a short period of time. That's one great thing about the BattleField. Okay. Now, what we talked about earlier in the video was about advanced techniques. Now, like I said, with Richard Niemzel, the inventor, he liked BattleField and it worked really well. But sometimes the results didn't last as long, or it didn't work on everybody. So what he did is he came up with, he called them modifications or advanced BattleField techniques and concepts. And in the class we'll be giving, and either online or in France, we'll talk about some of the ways you can actually enhance the results you get with BattleField. And it will help you in your clinic, help your patients. It will help them achieve much longer lasting health benefits and overall pain reduction. Just real quickly, I did a 5-year study on blood types and using ASP needles. And I got this information from the Native Americans here in the United States, and they were really good at telling me about specific blood types, which I didn't know much about. But certain blood types respond better emotionally and physically to ASP needles. And over a course of 5 years, I was able to come up with this information. This information will help you because there are a group of patients, specifically those who have O positive blood, who BattleField does work for, but it's a lot of stimulation. So if you use less needles on those patients, you'll have a more a compliant patient that will actually help you, help them better. So knowing the patient's blood type will really help you understand how you can help that patient. So it's a good information to have. I provide you just with a quick link here. At the end, there will be a link. You can see the whole study, but it's just some information that you can use that will help you help your patient. You know, it's one of those things I wish I would have known this many, many years ago. So we're going to show you the last video, and this is a short video about how the U.S. military got the acupuncture auricular therapy into the clinical hospital setting here in the U.S. And maybe some of you who work in this type of setting in the medical schools or teaching program, maybe this is something you can take back to your program and hopefully implement it. I'm not sure exactly how you guys are doing it there or how much auricular therapy you do there. So here is a quick last video on that. If I can get to it. Oh, sorry about that. Oops. Seeing it's not want to play here. Oh, I didn't see that down there, sorry.
Battlefield acupuncture was really developed by Colonel retired Richard Niemsau in the aftermath of 9/11.
I have seen many sad cases of patients returning from the war theater. Pain medication was not working.
Pain can be a really sort of like complex topic to try to address.
No estamos viendo el vídeo
It's
avanzar.
filled,
Te
especially when we
escuchamos
have
a ti, pero el vídeo está quieto.
with injuries
Tiene que
that
compartir el vídeo algo.
chronic. It's really valuable to have more than one like method to try to address that.
Whether it's acute pain due to a sprained ankle, fractured ankle, or
Hold on one second. Let me just see. I'm sorry you can't see this.
even more severe or ongoing pain, such as low back pain, or even cancer-related pain as well.
So having just returned from my second deployment, Battlefield Acupuncture was something that we use on a
Hold on
regular
one second.
basis to treat our soldiers, airmen, Marines.
Let me see if I can share this with you.
Guardians in a deployment.
I don't know why. I can just briefly speak about this. It's not that important. That's yeah. I don't know why the video is not playing here. Let me just see if I can put it on. Can you guys see my mouse and the screen here? Okay, so I'm on a different screen. Hold on a second here. Yeah, and I did do that. Hold on one second here. Let me just see if I can. You know what? Hold on a second here. It took me, you know. So this video is not in the slide share here. I don't know why. It should be in here. Hold on one second, let me see if I can.
Igual, si deja de compartir pantalla, la vuelve a compartir, ya coge la pantalla que quiere.
Okay, yeah, let me do that. Okay, there we go. And let me get back in here. Let me try this. Hold on.
Vale.
Oh, here, let's see this.
Deployed setting.
Can you see that now?
Battlefield acupuncture was really developed by Colonel retired Richard Niemsen.
Many
Ahora estamos viendo, pero no te oímos, Jaume.
from the war theater, pain medication was not working.
Pain can be a really
Ah, vale. Pues lo podemos volver a poner desde el principio, quizá.
with
Battlefield acupuncture was really developed by Colonel retired Richard Niemsen in the aftermath of 9/11.
I have seen many sad cases of patients returning from the war theater. Pain medication was not working.
pain can be a really sort of like complex topic to try to address. And in this field, especially when we have people coming back from overseas with injuries that can be either acute or chronic, it's really valuable to have more than one method to try to address that.
Whether it's acute pain due to a sprained ankle or a fractured ankle, or even more severe or ongoing pain, such as low back pain or even cancer-related pain as well.
So having just returned from my second deployment, battlefield acupuncture was something that we use on a regular basis to treat our soldiers, airmen, Marines, Guardians in a deployed setting.
Today we were doing battlefield acupuncture course, kind of going through the 5 points in each ear, practicing on a model and then practicing on our fellow students.
Great, put your finger on top.
One of the reasons why we think the battlefield acupuncture works so well is that it appears to stimulate key points of the ear that correlate to key points in the brain.
This training is really important because it's just another unique skill set that you can have to try to address your patient's pain in a non-traditional manner.
The results of a single treatment may literally last minutes, hours, days, weeks, or even years.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yep, and that's not a bad spot.
In our country, we have a problem with overuse of pain medications and polypharmacy in general. So having this as a tool, it's very versatile, lightweight, to bring into any setting is very, very effective for our military clinician.
Given the concern about opioid overuse and dependency in our country and in others as well, we really thought it important to teach our medical students this early on in their careers.
Most people's kind of goes back.
It's just having more tools in your toolkit to deal with pain and other things that pop up for guys other than your conventional stuff that you have. Having more tools is never going to be a bad thing.
I would just also add that in a deployed setting where people are wearing lots of gear, body armor, helmets, the ear in general is always readily accessible, so you can be highly effective and quick and get in there and hopefully reduce pain.
Down a little bit, right there. That's it.
It's a real pleasure to be able to show and teach this technique to future generations of students, and knowing that they're going to be able to take this and deploy this technique wherever they go, whatever practice they use, for the benefit of all our patients, not only in the military health system, but those in the civilian sector as well.
Were you able to see that now? Okay, so that's how the U.S. military has decided to bring acupuncture not just into the military, but also into the civilian setting. They talked about taking their physicians and actually have them train, so when they get out of school, they can now bring this with them. That was a medical school that's right down the street here from where I am in Washington, D.C. In the beginning of this seminar, we talked about Nemes out getting many millions of dollars to implicate battlefield acupuncture. Since that original $5 million that trained 3,000 people, he gets quite a bit of money every year to continue to further on this protocol in the military sector. And now we're starting to see it trickle down into the civilian sector. So some of the information that you see in front of you here is the information about how it all started. The next thing I just want to point out before we end here is that there was a study done at the hospital, at the VA hospital, and they used battlefield acupuncture prior to surgery. And they found that these patients who had the battlefield prior to surgery had a significant reduction in their pain afterwards. They needed less medication, less narcotics to get their pain down. So there's a study you can find here. They're all through the web. You can find them anywhere, but there's some really significant studies to show how this will really help your patients if they have a problem with narcotics. They either can't take them or they just don't want to take them, but it's a really good way of helping your patients help themselves with reduction of pain. And here's the results I was talking about, and I just showed you. And finally, thank you guys for letting me speak to you guys. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see a website. It's battlefiedacupuncture.net.research. If you go to battlefiedacupuncture.net and look up the research, you can find a lot of information on Battlefield there. A lot of clinical trials that are being done on Battlefield and how it's actually being used in the civilian sector for reduction of pain. So that's what I have today. If anybody has any questions, welcome to answer. Is that okay?
Muy bien, gracias a ti, John. Muchísimas gracias. Realmente se ha entendido todo muy bien. Gracias a ti, Jaume, el intérprete, que lo has traducido perfectamente. Ha sido muy ilustrador y realmente ilusionante. Yo creo que hasta yo tengo ganas de aprender ya esta técnica. Igual me veis en el curso. Bueno, seguro me veis en el curso. Bueno, a partir de aquí sí que podemos abrir las preguntas, que me habéis ido dejando algunas en el chat. Las voy a transmitir a John para que las podamos ir contestando. ¿De acuerdo? ¿Ok, John? Vale, pues vamos a buscar. A ver qué nos preguntaban por aquí. Espera, que se me ha ido alguna. Nos preguntaba Jesús si qué diferencia hay entre usar ASP de oro o ASP de acero. ¿Cuál sería mejor? También nos preguntaba. O más efectiva.
That's a good question. Thank you. I always ask the patient if they wear jewelry or if they're gonna wear jewelry, what type of metal do they prefer, gold or silver jewelry? Because you want to make sure that metal resonates with what that patient is and who they are. So if you have a patient who likes gold, they would prefer the gold versus those who prefer the silver. So it's always a patient preference. Also, underneath the gold is it's a film, just a little bit of gold under stainless steel. And even though I'm going to mix modalities of medicine here, which I'm really not supposed to do, you can say the gold is a yin and yang, so that's gold and stainless steel. But I prefer the gold, and that's what the military uses. But if your patient prefers the stainless steel, by all means, use those.
Vale, nos pregunta Carlos Lorenzo, dice, en el caso de lateralidad, ¿cómo trata una oreja o las dos?
We treat both ears all the time. I understand what you're saying about laterality. We find that sometimes when you treat both ears, the other side comes online. You can also treat the laterality first and then do battlefield. What we like to do here in the US is when we have a laterality issue, instead of treating specific laterality, is we use the 0.0 to kind of bring it online. It's a little different than you do in Europe.
También nos pregunta Carlos Lorenzo si usa algún martillo de Nogier para mejorar la ubicación del punto a tratar.
For the basic battlefield, no. There are specific points that are used. And that's the other thing too. When you look at the points where, if you look and say at the thalamus point or the 0.0 or the Shimnon point, you'll see when these points that we use, they're a little off center, is because they're clinically based. So for the basic battlefield, no, we don't use any stimulation devices like the hammer or electrical stim or point finder. When we get to the advanced techniques, when we're addressing battlefield pain plus specific pathology that didn't respond to the battlefield as well as we'd like, then yes, we would incorporate the Nogier hammer phases and electrical stim. Not for, but just for the advanced, not for the basic 5 points.
Muchas gracias, John. Nos pregunta Arancha, dice, bueno, nos comenta, dice, me llama la atención que en ningún momento ha hablado de energía.
Well, it's a different, so with the auricular, we don't use it as energy. We don't call it energy here in the US. We say it's more of a Western medicine or allopathic. We're using the ear that intersects with specific parts of the brain. We can use the word energy and all that stuff like that, but it confuses people who don't have the background in acupuncture. So we try to make it as simple as possible. But if energy is a word you understand and use, yeah, absolutely. For example, when I just spoke about the needles, the gold or silver, that's an energetic property of the patient. Even though I didn't say the word or say the word energy or anything like that, that's what we're doing. We're seeing what resonates best with them. Is it gold, is it silver? Because we're always getting feedback from our patients. So in this, you're right, in this speech, I didn't say energy, but it's littered throughout the entire.
Muy bien, yo creo que ha quedado aclarado. En caso de parálisis, nos pregunta Eva, en caso de parálisis o parestesias, ¿se puede recuperar el movimiento?
Sure, for like a stroke, you mean? For somebody had a stroke and they're not able to move. Sure, they were able to over time get some of that function back with battlefield and some of the advanced techniques too. Sure, it all depends on the patient's pathology, and of course how long they've been between treatments and when they were treated originally for their first condition. But yeah, you can use it for paralysis. Sure, absolutely, and all that, even with numbness too. Thank you for that question.
Muy bien. Nos pregunta si, Rosy nos pregunta si el dolor se quita definitivamente o es solo por un tiempo.
That's another question on the pathology. I've seen patients that the battlefield either did not work, or work for a short period of time. And I've seen other patients who've had years of relief in between treatments. So it all depends on the patient's pathology. I wish there was a more specific thing I can say, like this technique will last for this period of time, but it's all individualized and on the patient. But you'll be surprised what you'll see with the patients. Don't be surprised if you say that the pain's going, the relief is going to last 3 to 5 days. It'll last longer. So I'm always saying conservatively 3 to 5 days, but I've seen results last for quite some time.
Nos pregunta Eva si se pueden utilizar agujas normales o solo ASP.
Telex said you can only use ASPs. No, I'm just kidding. Of course, you can use whatever some of my patients, matter of fact, if we wait here long enough, right below me, there's a patient who's about to get this protocol, and they don't like the ASPs, so I have to use filiform needles. In children, I would use seeds. So absolutely, you can use other things. The thing with the ASPs is that they get the most relief and it lasts the longest. Anything other than that, it's kind of cut down. So, you know, you have to use what your patient is used to and what likes, but also you have to, you know, balance that work. And that's when I was presenting information about the blood types. If you know that they're an O positive, you say, okay, I have to pick the most important points. So you can use other needles besides CSPs.
Sí, nos pregunta Sofía si podrías explicar un poco más acerca del contenido del curso.
So what we're going to teach is the basic points of where they are. Earlier I said that the government is training 10,000 people how to do the battlefield, and they trained 3,000. Here in the US, to do this protocol, and this is I'm only speaking for the US, you need to be either a physician or an acupuncturist. You need 8 years of training before you can do this. So what we're seeing a lot of is people going on Google and seeing where points are, and they're really not that. That's a big problem we're having. So we address why you're seeing this. We address where the points are clinically based on the work of Noge and Nimzao. So you're going to get that good information. So when you see information that might be confusing, you'll know where it came from and how to use the information we give you. Plus, you also get to know, like, okay, so battlefield's good for pain, but what about emotional stuff? What about things that don't respond? Or what about things that are like numbness or tingling? You know, you learn all those techniques. How it's broken down is specifically the clinical. The beginning part is we're going to talk about the didactic acupuncture part of it. And then in the afternoon, you'll see clinical demonstrations, which will have a video or two of the demonstrations on how it works. Like I said, you probably will see 1 or 2 needles put in and you'll be like, that's it. That's all it usually takes. People respond really quickly. Now that I said that, watch, the first patient might take all 10 needles, but you know, you'll get the didactic information on how to do the battlefield, how to address specific pain pathologies, and then how to do it as a clinical hands-on. So.
De todas maneras, por aportar, en el programa está anunciado el curso, veis en detalle el contenido del primer día y del segundo día, con las perlas clínicas, la incorporación de fases de Noge, cómo aprender y usar el protocolo BFA, usar de manera eficaz las ASP y aprender la técnica correcta de inserción, identificar los efectos secundarios y resultados de la BFA, aplicar la BFA en la práctica clínica de manera satisfactoria, saber cómo y cuándo utilizar el protocolo. Vamos, está creo que bien explicado, y es una técnica que vais a poder aprender, que con este curso podéis aprenderla del todo. Luego la práctica os va a llevar a la excelencia, ¿no? Pero en un curso de 2 días, como hemos programado, lo vais a poder aprender completamente. Entonces, seguimos con las preguntas. Perdonad por la introducción, pero bueno, creo que así completaba un poco la respuesta. Nos pregunta José si esta técnica está basada en la acupuntura zonal o acupuntura simplificada de muñecas y tobillos, descubierta por Xin-Su Zhang.
It's completely something different. It's not based on the microsystem for wrist and foot, or hand and foot. It's based on the microsystem in the ear, the inverted fetus of the ear, and it uses the brain as a way of addressing specific pathologies and stuff like that. Where when you're doing the wrist and hand acupuncture, foot and hand acupuncture, you're addressing the meridians and specific pain pathways. Where in the ear, we're using specifically cranial nerves to do that. And I understand, the other thing I want to say real quickly is I understand that, you know, coming, you guys in Europe, it might sound kind of foreign or odd that you're not using the Voss pulse or addressing laterality. It might sound crazy, but the good thing is here in the US, you don't train a lot of people to do the Vaz pulse. So we were able to break this down to the simplest form. So when you do the Vaz pulse, or you do use the laterality stuff, it becomes even more enhanced. So I just wanted to say that this is a quick and easy way that we taught the military. But as like say, in my courses, we teach a little bit more because most people have an understanding of auricular.
Entiendo que no utilizáis el VAS, porque es la siguiente pregunta.
What is the Vaz again? No, I do. I understand what the question is. You don't need to. That's the great thing about this protocol. I do use the Vaz, but specifically with pain, I don't need to. If my patients don't respond to BattleField, then I'll use the Vaz, but normally you don't. And I know that sounds kind of foreign, and it's kind of like trying to wrap your head around that. Even me to articulate that's kind of hard. But I do use the Vaz, but not for when I use BattleField. I use it for emotional stuff and other complex pain conditions that respond with BFA.
Muchas gracias, John. A ver, Mati nos pregunta si tratamos un paciente con una lesión, ¿es posible que al no sentir dolor y continuar su día a día puede generar una lesión mayor?
I see you have Americans there. You take away someone's pain, they have no more problems, of course. What I say if you read my notes, we get them, they're down to about a 1 to a 3. We don't, especially if the patient is what I call a liar. If they're endurance athletes, you got to be careful with runners. Oh, once you get them out of pain, they're going to go right back to doing it. You need to know your patients and how to calibrate them to determine what pain level you should bring them down to. Now, look, I'm not saying play God, but you know your patients better than anybody. So if you know your patient's going to go and get themselves in trouble, yeah, you can probably get their pain level down, but you better stop because it's not going to benefit them or you. So, you got to kind of rein them in, but you're absolutely right. That's a big problem with BattleField. You can get them down to no pain, and next thing you know, they're off to the races, and then you'll have problems. So yeah, we'll teach you how to facilitate that issue.
Vale. A ver, nos pregunta Miriam, dice, se habló de un protocolo básico y por lo que se explicó la BFA va dirigido al dolor, pero nos pregunta si nos puede hablar más en detalle de otros protocolos. ¿Cuántos más hay y ejemplos de qué se puede tratar?
In general, I have about 12 different protocols besides BFA. You can treat emotional problems. You can treat paresthesia, neuropathy. Like I just said, you can make runners run faster. If that's what you're into. Just a whole bunch of other things. Headaches is a big one too. Different types of headaches too. Migraines, just all sorts of stuff. The emotional component is another one. So you can help people not with just depression, but also with anxiety too, and fears and phobias. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, the other ones too. And sleep. We talked about how you can get better sleep along with the BattleField too, especially if you're having sleep issues, not specifically addressed with pain, with that too, but also if you're just having issues with insomnia. So there's about 12 or 13 other than the basic BattleField.
Muy bien. Bueno, veo que se está haciendo tarde. Vamos a acabar las preguntas que hay ya en el chat y vamos a cerrar las preguntas porque ya veo que mucha gente está yéndose, que se está haciendo tarde. ¿Vale? Acabamos de contestar las que hay y ya, pues, ya. ¿De acuerdo? Entonces, nos preguntaba Jordi si se puede combinar con técnica de acupuntura TUM o otras técnicas.
Absolutely. That was the great thing about the battlefield. It works with synergy and other modalities. What I would suggest is that the best way to do the battlefield is, if you're going to do the tongue or the basic body acupuncture, is to do that first. When you're done with the patient, if they have any pain left over after you didn't like the tongue treatment or the dong treatment, then you would address it with battlefield. I always would do what you learned first, which is your whatever the tongue techniques, and then do battlefield as an adjunct. If you do battlefield first and have the patient lay down, it usually doesn't work too well. They get worked up. They get kind of anxious and a lot of energy.
Muy bien. Luego Andrea nos pregunta una cosa. Dice que ella vio en la web de BFA que para recibir la certificación en BFA se necesita una formación de 2 días más el curso de 8 horas, UNIT 1, UNIT 2, y hacer 40 tratamientos UNIT 3. ¿Cómo y cuándo harán la formación de la UNIT 1 aquí? Yo creo que esto, el curso se ha rediseñado para poderlo ofrecer aquí en España, que podáis aprender la técnica en unos módulos a distancia por online en estas 8 horas. No vamos a dar una certificación específica en BFA. Bueno, esta es la parte que yo puedo comentar. No sé si John quiere comentar alguna cosa más.
Yeah, that's a good question, because Sunday I was talking with my colleague Eric Zareski, who we do the certification program, and we thought, since we're cutting this one down, how can we facilitate the rest of the training for people who take like an online course or people who take a different type of course. So there will be some information coming out in the next week or two about how you can, get all that information and transfer over to be certified into the BFA program. You eventually will be able to, but how we're going to get you there is we're still working out the steps for that. But I think it's going to be just a few more treatments that you would just turn in for right now.
Vale, vamos allá. Nos pregunta Merced, dice, gracias por el enfoque, técnica de auriculoterapia. Dice, pero si ya sabemos auriculoterapia, ¿qué hay de nuevo? ¿También os basáis en testear si punturáis según buscapuntos? Entiendo que quiere decir si usamos buscapuntos para localizar y decidir el punto.
For the basic battlefield, no, we don't use any type of point testing or any type of VAS and stuff like that. For if we're going to address specific pathology after the battlefield, we use a pressure point, a pressure probe, the blue pressure probe that cellatelic cells, or if they're a neurohormonal, such as that doesn't respond to the pain stimuli, we'll use the thing cellatelic uses to determine point finder and detection and treatment. So we'll use that. But in general, that's only if the battlefield doesn't work. I think that the hardest thing is that for people who know auricular, this is so backwards that it's so hard to kind of comprehend something so simple. It's almost like it kind of tricks you. It's so simple. I think in general, we're always looking to advance our knowledge and understanding. And with battlefield, we kind of we take it at an elementary step, and it will, if you do auricular, this will kind of make you think twice about different things and how to approach different things. So it is a little bit of a mind game. So I understand that from knowing auricular.
A ver, ¿había alguna pregunta más? Eva nos pregunta, dice, me refiero a secuelas tras pinzamiento de nervio, pero no sé a qué se relaciona esta pregunta. Antes preguntaste por las agujas ASP normales. No sé, bueno, igual a mí se me ha escapado. Dice, bueno, dice, sí, Si se refiere a las secuelas tras pinzamiento de nervio.
When you say nerve pinching, do you mean like a surgical procedure, or like a burning or cutting, or do you mean just like the patient has this nerve flare up, like an RSV or complex pain syndrome? I do. Yeah, sure. Sure, you can address that neuropathic pain with BattleField.
Vale, también nos pregunta Enrique si se podría utilizar en fibromialgias, artritis, dolores menstruales.
Fibromyalgia was the first patient that Nintel used. When he went back the next day after he learned all those techniques, his first patient was a fibromyalgia patient. And he'd say that he would do multiple treatments with acupuncture, different stimulations, physio. And on a good day, it would take him 45 minutes to get a pain from an 8 to a 4. And when he used a BattleField, it went from an 8 to a 2 after 2 needles. So yeah, you can use it for those. It works really well for those pathologies. Sure does.
Muy bien. Andrea insiste en las unidades y dice, esta formación de Zenlong es para la UNIT 2, no es cierto, pero la UNIT 1, ¿cuándo lo tendrán? Creo que es lo que has explicado antes, pero no estoy seguro.
For the training program, the Unit 1 and the Unit 2 are live seminars. And then the follow-on is where you would do a patient treatments and you would send it in. So there's other things we have in the works, like clinical pearls, how to address specific other pathologies that we don't go into very much. But for the most part, the 2-day course will give you the information you need to treat just about a lot of different things. I mean, 90% of the stuff you'll see you can get in those 2-day courses. You don't need to do the training if you do the online or the in-person part. The training or the certification. Yeah.
Vale, veo que no me escucháis. Siguen entrando preguntas. Os dije que ya no había más preguntas. Entonces ya corto yo, no os preocupéis, majetes. Y voy preguntando. ¿Es efectivo en dolores de tipo nervioso como la neuralgia del trigémino?
Yeah, you're about to see her in a minute. I have like I said, a patient downstairs who has she had trigeminal neuralgia, but she also has neuropathy in the foot. It sure does. It does work for that, and sometimes it works like almost really quickly. The other thing is I want to say is I understand you're less on time, but if you would write questions down, I can answer anybody's questions when we're offline if you'd like to.
Vale. Sí, pues vamos a dar por concluido. Lamento que algunas preguntas se queden fuera, se queden en el tintero. Nos pregunta la última que voy a atender, se nos pregunta Miriam, porque está en el programa y creo que es interesante, si se tratan solo problemas de dolor con BFA o se trata directamente también el trauma que se tuvo en el campo de batalla. Me pareció ver que en el programa hablábamos de una perla que era el tratamiento del estrés postraumático, ¿verdad, John?
That's correct. Matter of fact, some of the protocols specifically address that. I think if you go to that website I gave you, there's a great protocol where we use how to treat specific patients. But also one of those points that they found with the research, the singular gyrus, that treats the pain and the emotions associated with pain also. So you can treat both pain and the emotions of pain, absolutely.
Muy bien. Pues bueno, aquí lo vamos a dar por terminado. Lamento que algunas preguntas se hayan quedado en el tintero, pero ya veo que la audiencia también está bajando casi a la mitad, que os estáis viendo, que los niños están gritando, tengo hambre, mamá, tengo hambre, quiero cenar ya. Y claro, ante eso uno no puede resistirse. Así que, bueno, espero que nos veamos en el curso. Cualquier duda, cualquier otra pregunta, cualquier...
I can answer them.
¿A dónde?
If you can take something in the chat, if they can write in the chat and then you can forward it on to me, maybe copy and paste into a Word document or something, absolutely. It'd probably be quicker that way because they're probably already in there. They're here now. They want to ask that.
Muy bien. De acuerdo. Pues así lo haremos. Muchas gracias, John, muy amable. Bueno, espero que os haya resultado de interés, que haya valido la pena y que nos veamos en el curso. Realmente a mí me ha impresionado la rapidez en los resultados, la efectividad, los testimonios que hemos visto de soldados en plena acción. Bueno, yo creo que es algo diferente, no es la auriculoterapia que yo veo que hacemos todos los días o que hemos estudiado tradicionalmente, ¿no? Es algo diferente, algo que aporta y que puede dar mucho a nuestros pacientes. Así que gracias, Estefanía. No sé si tú quieres despedirte y decir algo a nuestros compañeros.
Muchas gracias a todos por venir esta noche. Muchas gracias a Fede para organizar esto y a Jaume para hacer la traducción en simultánea y a John, por supuesto, pero ya estoy trabajando mucho con John por todas las partes. Y bueno, me alegro, espero que os gustó y que os veré muchos en el curso de John. Hasta pronto.
Gracias, Estefanía. Pues damos por finalizado. John, ¿quieres aportar alguna cosa antes de despedirte?
No, thank you for having me here. And like I said, it is, like you said, it is different protocol, and it's one of those things where you just have to kind of see it to believe it. It's, you know, it's great for you guys to even, you know, put this on, you and Stephanie, and I really appreciate it, and to give the talk to hopefully it helps some of your colleagues' patients.
No, hombre, no. Ha sido enriquecedor. No ha habido que usar la paciencia. Pues lo dicho, gracias a todos. Quedamos a vuestra disposición. Haremos lo posible por contestar estas preguntas tal como ha comentado John. Y espero que nos veamos pronto. Ya digo, yo quedo a vuestra disposición para cualquier duda en cuanto a lo que es el tema del curso, contratación, la posibilidad de verlo grabado si hay alguna dificultad a la hora de asistir el mismo día. Y bueno, y en cuanto a los materiales, por supuesto, pues aquí estamos para eso, ya lo sabéis. Estoy dispuesto a todo siempre que me pilláis unas agujitas. ¿Vale? Buenas noches, gracias. Chao.